உள்ளதனதுள்ளமுதர் உள்ளதோ உள்ளபொருள் உள்ளதன உள்ளத்தே உள்ளதோ உள்ளமெனும் உள்ள பொருள் உள்ளலவன் உள்ளத்தே உள்ளபடி உள்ளதே உள்ளுணர்வாய். The board. In this our meditation song, the Ulladu Narpadu, we have come to the body of the word moon, and we are starting the second verse. As we had seen earlier, the overall layout of the work is according to what Bhagavan always tells, that the highest truth is always told in the very beginning itself. So we find that in the Mangala Shloka, and the second Mangala Shloka of course was on the surrender to Maheshwara, Maranabhavamilla Maheshwaran. And there the body of the work begins, the 40 verses, and we found that the first 22 verses are on Viveka or discrimination. Then the next 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, they are on the abhyasa or the practice, or to many commentators, the core for the sadhaka lies in those verses. Then we have the anubhava of the sage, that is from 30, 31 to 40. Now the 30th verse can be considered both here and there, because it talks of the anubhava as well as what leads to the anubhava. So many times you will find me strangely including it in the abhyasa segment and sometimes in the anubhava segment. Don't be very much perplexed by that, because both are there in that verse. So we go into the second verse. Mummudalai emmadamu murkollu. Mummudalai emmadamu murkollum போர் முதலே மும்முதலாய் நிற்கும் என்றும் மும்முதலும் மும்முதலே என்னல் அகங்காரம் இருக்கும் மட்டே யான் கெட்டு அந்நிலையில் நிற்றல் தலையாகும். As is my usual practice, I have left out the point which I wanted to make in the beginning, that in the Viveka segment of first 22 verses, the first four verses interestingly form one complete set of teachings. The first verse, as we have seen, Namulaham Kandala Nanavam Shakti Ula Or Mudalai Oppal Urukalaye Nama Uru Sithiravum Parpanum Serpadavum Aroliyum Athanayum Thana Avan. That was on the self, that everything is the Atman. So the first verse is as usual carrying the highest. Within the Viveka itself, first four give a complete account of the whole teachings. So the first verse is on the self. The second verse, which we are by Bhagavan's grace going to meditate on today, is on Ishvara. Mummudalai emmadamu murkollum ஓர் முதலே மும்முதலாய் நிற்கும் என்றும் என்றும் மும்முதலும் மும்முதலே என்னல் அகங்காரம் இருக்கும் பட்டு யான் கெட்டு தன்னிலையில் நிற்றல் தலையாகும். Then we come to Ulladu. The third verse is on world. First verse is on self, Second verse is on Ishvara, leading to the self. Then the third verse is on Ulladu. Ulladu meipoi thotram, Ullaga arivam, andrendru, Ullaga sugam, andrendru uraithan, Ullagu vittu, tannai orndu, ondrirandu thanatru, nanatra annilai, ellarkum oppam. That is how the third verse covers the Ullaga, the world. First verse on the self directly, second verse on how the religions have the concepts about God, about three realities or one reality, and then the third verse on Ullagu. In what way should we hold inquiry about the world? And the fourth is on the ego. Uruvam Tanayin, Ullagu para Matram, Uruvam Tanandrel, Uvatrin Uruvate, Kandurudal Yavan Kandalar Kashindo, Kandadatan, Andamila Kandam. These four verses, they complete the discussions on the teachings. So we are going into the second of those verses today. Mummudalai Yemmadamu Murkullum. So in the first verse, it was direct the finding of the sage that whatever we see, the multiplicity of the scene, the seer, the screen, those are the two things which once again had left out in discussing in the first verse. So let's go briefly into that before coming into this verse, because those were interesting findings we had got. That what is this screen? In our discussion, we had gone through that the picture of the names and forms, the seer, the screen on which the picture is displayed, the light which reveals everything, are all nothing but the self we saw. Attanayam Tanamavan. During the discussions in the week, some 2 points had come up which may be of interest in practice, in Anubhavam, as we go through in self-inquiry. So briefly, allow me to go back into that. That is, what is this screen on which the picture is displayed? So we found that we can take it as the Sakshi, the unaffected witness can be the place where the screen can be imagined, on which the names and forms are still visible, and it is the Adhara. The Sakshi itself is the Adhara, but the Sakshi is unaffected by the play of names and forms. The screen is unaffected by the floods or the fire or whatever happens, because it is Sakshi Bhava. So the Sakshi which we were referring to in Anubandham, the Sakshi of course means that consciousness which is completely bereft of good and bad, right and wrong, which is in fact free of cause and effect also, because any division can be taken as the division of good and bad. Any name you give for a division in consciousness, you can bring it back to one duality. So no dualities are there in that consciousness. That is the Sakshi Bhava. So the Sakshi Bhava is the screen. So when we go into witnessing, we can say that we are now in touch with the screen. What is this light, the Aruli, the permeating light which permeates everything? That is the light of self-attention is what we found. And that is also an interesting and very practical finding for us in sadhana, that this Purana is self-attention. And self-attention is Ishvara Shakti, Paramasya Shakti. It is the highest Shakti. So Bhagavan is directly putting the sadhaka onto the highest Shakti in asking us to do self-inquiry. Let it be the deepest of troubles you find in any of the worlds. Nothing can stand before self-attention, because self-attention is of a completely higher dimension to any of the Triputis. Let the Triputi threaten you in any way, doesn't matter. If you start asking for whom is this, then that power of that Shakti which is threatening you is just evaporated, is just annihilated. Now that is the power to which Bhagavan takes us directly. So what is this Aruli? We saw that the padam or the screen is the Sakshi. The Aruli is the Sakshi inquiring who is witnessing, who is the unaffected witness, and that self-attention which is there, which consumes the Triputi. The self-attention which consumes the Triputi is the Aruli. Now that is this Purana, but in Purana also we discussed, if you remember, that there can be variation in the Shakti. Though it is the Adhara for Triputi, there are various layers of Triputi. So we found that the Ishvara Shakti or this Purana can go up or down the requirement to balance the Triputi to which it is addressing. And we also discussed that is felt when we sit in Atma Vicharam, the one conducting can feel the Shakti doing the work. The one who is conducting need not do any work and should not do any work. Can see the Spurana, the light of self-attention, connecting everyone and doing the needful. But that will have variation. And I shared with you that will be high at some points, and at some points where it is not necessary for the group, it will be at a lower level or a subtler level. Now, there is variation in that. The point is that in Purana there can be variation. So, in self, that variation is also completely absorbed into the being, pure being. That is, there is nothing to light, to burn, or to remove as I am the body idea. So, the light which has lit the camphor, whether of the individual doing sadhana or when a group is doing, the light keeps burning, the vasanas rising up. It is natural for it to rise up and burn the vasanas at that time. So just hold it and keep quiet, says Bhagavan. So whether the inverted commas group or individual, which we will see during this verse, the reality of that division, that connection given by this Purana, you should just hold it and keep quiet, says Bhagavan. Then the Purana or the light which has lit the camphor of I am the body attachment, that light also will quieten down into the self, because the self is effortless and apparently powerless. It is full of peace, but it is only pure being. It is pure being. That alone rises as the first Shakti, as the root of all powers, as this Purana. Now, why it rises as the need to know oneself? There is no gainsaying that. We have to go back the way we came and go to the self, that's all. There is no why there, because this Purana itself does not give room for any thought to come. So, one can only directly experience the truth of this Purana, keep quiet and experience the truth of the self. So, those 2 points which I had not been able to cover in the first verse, the point number 1 being the screen is perhaps when sadhaka identifies with the Sakshi, which we had seen during our earlier discussions. Swami Kanakadasa discussing how that Manas Sakshi is seeing every thought of his. So that Sakshi, when we identify the unaffected witness, that is the screen on which the entire play of names and forms is displayed and is here. Now when the Sakshi turns back into self-attention, the attention turning on its own source, that is the Aruli, the permeating light, and that permeating light too quietens into the self is what we saw. Now, with your permission, let me go into the current verse. Mummudalai Yemmadamum Murkollum. All the religions or all the religious thoughts, they always hold 3 first principles. The first principles being God, world and individual. 3 first principles are held. Of course, on this point there are some books that probably this religion doesn't, that religion doesn't, but we can take it that most of the religions, by acceptance or by denial, they take the three first principles for discussion. Even when they actively deny, in one sense they are giving existence to that, which we will see during the course of discussion of Ulladu Narpadu, where we talk of the story of don't think of the monkey while taking the medicine. So by saying it does not exist, it is brought into existence. Mummudalai yemmadamum murkullum. All religions are accepted or agreed on this point that we can begin our inquiries by taking three first principles as existing. That is the world, the individual and God. Or mudale mummudalai nirkum endrum. Some religious beliefs or some factions of a particular religion may say that there is only one God who has manifested as the three. The one God has manifested as world, individual and the God. And there are some factions or religions which says mummudalam mummudale. Always all the three first principles good. All the three first principles hold good all the time. They are real all the time. These are the two major divisions. Of course, there is the subdivision of Visishta Advaita, which says that while ignorance or sadhana is there, then God is God. God is God, Jiva is Jiva, world is world. We need God's grace during sadhana. But the moment the sadhana is completed and doership is offered to God, then the self alone is the Advaita Bhava is blessed on us by the God to whom we have surrendered. So it is qualified monism is there, that is in between. We will see in another verse, that is verse number 37, I think. Yes, Sadhagattile duvidam, Sadhyatila duvidam. That is verse number 37. We can remember that this verse number 2 is going to be expanded in verse number 37. But it is sufficient to discuss what we have on hand now. The first two sentences approach the first cause up to Ishvara, the first principle, in this manner, that the three first principles of world, individual and God are accepted by all religions. Some religions say that the only one first principle manifests, divides itself and appears as the three. Or mudale mummudalai nirkum. Endrum mummudalam mummudale. The other factions say always the three first principles are three first principles. They all have independent realities. World has its independent reality, individual has independent reality, and God of course has independent reality. But these two factions of the religious belief systems arise only, that is what the next verse is going, next sentence is going to say. Ennal ahankaram irukkumatte. This division or the fight between whether duality is real or Advaitya is real is only so far as the ego is there. Ahankaram irukkumatte. So far as a separate ego exists, this war between the two factions, they arise. Three factions later on in verse 37, they arise. Ahankaram irukkumatte. Yan kettu tannilayil nitral talayagum. To completely annihilate that separate ego and to abide as the self, going back to the first verse, abide as the self is the highest or is the supreme state. Neither the discussions about that one has manifested as three, nor the discussions about all the three remaining, three all the time. Neither of them is supreme. It is only the ego annihilated consciousness where one is abiding as the self, that is the supreme, says Bhagavan. So combine all those ideas together, all those pointers for sadhana together, we have the meaning of the verse as three first principles are posited by all religions. One first principle has divided itself and manifested as the three, says some, but some others say that three remain always as three first principles, but these two factions arise only after the arising of the ego. Therefore, to annihilate the separate ego and abide as the self, which is in support of the one dividing as three, to abide as the self alone is the supreme state. So the experience or the actuality or the inherence in the truth of the self is the supreme state, says Bhagavan. Neither argue about Advaita nor should we argue about Dvaita. Many times when Bhagavan is asked about this conflict about Dvaita and Advaita and Visishta Advaita, Bhagavan will overcome that by saying that all the gurus in all the three teachings, they are agreed on one point, that the separate ego has to be inquired into and erased. The doership has to be inquired into and erased. So get to the task. Get to the task of inquiring who am I. Whatever is the truth, that let it reveal itself, is what he would say. So let us go into the meaning of the verse proper. Mummudalam, Mummudalai Emmadamum Murkullum. I think we don't need to discuss about what is world, what is individual, what is the concept of God. A brief moment we can say that the world is multiplicity of names and forms. When all those names and forms are aggregated into one name or form, we call that as God. Let's temporarily agree on that idea and then proceed with our discussion, because it is helpful in sadhana. That what is this world? World is multiplicity of names and forms. But as we saw in Upadesha Saram, Ashtamurti Brud Deva Pujanam, all these are nothing but the name and form of only one deity. So we can consider them as the name or form of one. Then we have the God. So the individual, of course, is the seeker. If he considers himself separate from God and practices, there is meditation. If the Advitiya Bhava is there in practice, there is Atma Ucharam. But that is much later that we go into that. Mummudalai Emmadamum Murkullum. The three first principles are agreed on by all the major religious beliefs, religious systems. Or Mudale Mummudalai Nirkum. So this is adequately covered by the first verse. So we are not going into the explanation of that. That there is only one first principle, which is the self, which rises as the Arolis, Purana, which rises as the witness, the screen, which then multiplies as the seer and the names and forms. So that we have seen in the first verse itself, how the first principle alone rises and manifests as the apparent reality, which has to be retraced, Vandavadiye self, which has to be retraced to the self to find the truth of everything. So that sentence also we are not going to go into much. That is, Or Mudale Mummudala Nirkum. Yendrum Mummudalum Mummudale. For this, let us spend some time. What is the argument in saying that the teachings that Yendrum Mummudalum Mummudale, all the three realities are always real. Now, there is a scientific discussion by Tomchi, which we have held again and again, which to recall, the finest particles of which we are all, the body is made, the electrons, protons, of which the body is made, because body is in one sense made of atoms, let us say. He of course discusses that 7% of these atoms are exchanged with the world every day. Every day the atoms amounting to one arm is exchanged with the world, and in 2 weeks the whole body is changed, though some atoms like calcium or iron may remain, but anyway in 6 months or 1 year it is all recycled. But 99% of the body's atoms are recycled within 2 weeks itself. So the body is changing at that faster rate. But the point about mummudalum mummudale, the interesting fact is that the scientists have found out, though don't ask me how, I have referenced that they are all agreed on this, that the electron and proton, the proton, it lives a billion times the life of the present universe. The universe is, let us say, 14 billion years old. The proton of which we are made is going to live, this universe can be recreated up to the present point. It can be recreated a billion times. It is unimaginably immortal, the electron and proton, the substance with which the world can be made. Now that is the story we have about mummudalum mummudale, that if the electron is like that, then there could be even subparticles which could have even more greater life. That means the same story of this universe can be rewritten by the same God. God, if we take as the knowledge behind the creation, the patterns behind the creation, the knowledge that affords the creation to run its course for billions of years and for repeating itself, that knowledge being constant, it is able to run this show again and again, billions and billions of times. That is known to man. As far as electron and proton are concerned, this universe can you imagine that billion times it can be rerun? The story can be rerun. That possibility is opened up, though there are many other possibilities. But that is the story we have in Dvaita. That is the strong story we have, that the world is immortal. The story is going to be told again and again. Now that opens up the possibility of a permanent hell and certain jivas always toiling in the darkness of hell and all those things which are beyond our scope of discussion right now. But there is a permanent world, good and bad, and of course the components, the jivas, they have permanency because there is a knowledge pattern. The jiva is a knowledge pattern to which the atoms dance. The atoms of this body dance to the self of Nandakumar, like that. The pattern which God has created, because that pattern identifies different atoms as Nandakumar. The atoms are changing, but that knowledge pattern is saying, oh, this is Nandakumar, that knowledge pattern is there, so that individual self is also, so far as atoms are there, the individual self also will be there, the God also will be there, billions and billions of times this universe is life. So that is the argument we have in favor of Mummudalam Mummudale. You can go on about that. But there is a way out of it. There is a way out of that argument, which is once again brought in by relatively simple science. I am not going into complicated science because I don't know. The simple fact is I don't know those complications. But this was an experiment found hundreds of years ago, which is called as double slit experiment, which all of us can understand if we just look into the net. They have come up with, from which the quantum physics and all have come, they have come up with an interesting finding that when the particles used in the experiment are small enough, like an electron, then, and if it is passed through two slits, double slit, then it stops being a particle. It takes the form of a wave. It takes the form of a wave function. That means it's a continuous wave. on the other side of the screen, instead of particle nature, wave function is displayed. That means when the particles are small, if we can see what we are seeing as small enough, then this whole creation is one wave. It is not made of Nandakumar 1, Nandakumar 2, Nandakumar 3, Nandakumar 7 billion like that. No. It is made of one flow. This is the double slit experiment put in the crudest form. So if you want refined, you please go into the net and see. Interestingly, what they found in the double slit experiment is the moment the measurement is put, the observer wants to see which slit the electron entered, because to make the experiment more refined, they start shooting one electron after another, so that there is no interference between the electrons. But after some time, that one electron itself produces the screen or the wave function. Now, therefore, when the observer wants to look which of the two slits it entered, immediately the waves get collapsed, the wave function is collapsed, the togetherness is gone, and the individuality starts, the particulate behavior starts. Now, that indicates that the life of electron, being billions and billions of years, gets collapsed into a wave function if we don't want to see which of the two slits it has entered. That is, if you take the intellect, the good and the bad, if you leave the good and the bad, if you leave the cause and the effect, if you leave that duality, then we see what is seen from a witnessing perspective as a flow of life, and the witness itself being unaffected. So the Tripurti gets collapsed there. Tripurti of the world being billions and billions of years being right, being alive, the individual, all the individual separations being alive all the time, and the one God, the one pattern which is running all these things being alive, that collapses when we come to witnessing, when we come to Sakshi Bhava. Then the Sakshi itself collapses the multiple jivas also into Eka Jiva, as we can see a little bit later in Bhagwan's own words. So the Mummudalam Mummudale can be collapsed like this, but however, it requires a lot of proofs which we don't have enough evidence as of now. So the Dvaitins will continue to say that, and quite rightly so, that the worlds may live for billions and billions of years, for which scientific proof is there. And the Advaitins will keep on saying that there is only one self. But how to overcome this, where so much evidence lies on both the situations, both the cases, and the scientific proof to collapse the individuality and come to the oneness of the flow? Even there they are stuck. The observer effect is stuck, because science is not able to come to the subjective reality. They remain with the objective reality, but meditators can come to the subjective reality. The twist there, if I may go to that extent, is that not only is the experiment containing electrons, the observer or the observation is also of fundamental particles, is of particles which are in wave form. So the moment you see wave there, you should understand that the observation as well as the observer are part and parcel of the wave, are part and parcel of the one spirit. That they are not able to make, that the meditator or Atmavichari is able to make but will remain unable to prove, because science will have objective evidences as a requirement. Quite rightly so, that's their path. But we'll have to come to Anubhava. That is where Bhagavan comes in and says, don't get into these arguments. Don't try to prove that no, these electrons are going to live billion times, therefore all the three are three all the time. Nor should we get into arguments about, no, see, this is the proof we have, and this is how the individuality collapses, this is how witnessing comes, this is how self-attention comes. Therefore, in self-attention, all the worlds, all the Triputis are absorbed, and self-attention itself gets silenced into the self. So the Anubhava is only one first principle. Don't get into these arguments. Though we have the written statements of Bhagavan, the written statements are all in this field of three dimensions. The arguments are all in this three-dimensional world. Ekam aksharam, hrudi nirantaram, bhasate swayam, likyate katam. That ekam aksharam can never be written and proved, can never be argued and proved, because the argument and writing is in the three-dimensional field. And the three-dimensional field is so limited that even a fourth dimension cannot be proved there, cannot be shown there, cannot be displayed there. We can only imagine a fourth, and scientists may agree about that, but they may not be willing to go to the subjective self-attention consuming everything. But Bhagavan says, go into your anubhava. What is the anubhava he wants us to have? He says that yan kette. Let the individual annihilate the separate ego. The feeling that we are separate from the others, we have seen earlier that is an optical illusion. That this I am separate from another is an optical illusion. The discussion in the scientists from Tomchi and Einstein also we had taken, where they are also agreed that to just utter these English words, all the connections with the first stars which were formed is all required. Everything connected with each other, and that is what has brought us here. That is, the individuality is an unreality, is common knowledge even to scientists and to Dvaitins. That even in Dvaita, they will say, though there are three realities, the Ishvara Shakti is what is running, therefore surrender to God and losing doership is common to the Dvaita also. So, what the connectivity does, the understanding that the connection from beginning of creation to end of creation, everything is connected. What it does is, it helps us remove doership. It helps us understand that we are just like a bacteria which lived for 15 days. We are that when we are individual. But the moment we are connected with that connecting energy, when we understand that everything is connected, every breath of ours becomes meaningful. Every action of ours becomes meaningful, because that connection is going to take the connections forward. But this is what is called as Manigalil Saradu. This is up to this point, Bhagavan also comes as Manigalil Saradu, and in Gita also it is said that I am the thread on which all the beings are beads. But then Krishna, the Gita Acharya, as well as Bhagavan talk about Advitiya. How does that shift happen from everything is connected to everything is one? That we see in the earlier verse we saw through witnessing, through self-attention. And there is a quotation in talks which I have given in the group, where Bhagavan Sri Krishna, he says both. He says that I alone am, and he also says all the beings are like beads. And the questioner asks Bhagavan, how can both be true? So Bhagavan says the line of indication is towards oneness. That even when Manigalil Saradu is mentioned, it is only to aggregate the multiplicity into a garland. Therefore, one should naturally proceed to there is nothing but me, there is nothing other than me. Therefore, there is no gap, there is no difference between the beads and the string. Both the beads and the string are nothing but the self. That is how the aggregation into Yan Kettu. Yan Kettu happens in two stages. We feel that there is the loss of doership, which is agreed by Dvaitins and Advaitins. Then there is the loss of individuality completely, where there is alone, which is what the Advaitins say, that Yan Kettu, not the doership alone, Yan Kettu, the individuality completely removed. Tannilayil neutral, to avoid in the self, Talayahum is the supreme state. Now here, interestingly, and not surprisingly, just day before yesterday, Venkateshji had read in the morning satsang, I think it is talk number 571. Once again, I have quoted, you can see that, where Bhagavan discusses how this integration from Manigal to the self comes. Somebody asks about that to say that there are multiple selves is wrong, I agree. However, what is wrong in saying that there are multiple jivas? We see multiple jivas, don't we? I agree that that means his indication is that let there be jivas, let the jivas be as perpetual as the oneself. Let the oneself be, let the jivas also be immortal and be always there. Bhagavan takes that discussion as I have quoted, that it is said that only one sees the many. So all those jivas, the other jivas are seen by me. So when I go inward, at one point I see many jivas, then I understand it is me who is seeing many jivas. So there, all the other jivas, just like the other multiple names and forms, the other multiple jivas are all aggregated into me. I am the one seer seeing many jivas. So that brings us to Eka Jiva Tattva, says Bhagavan. Eka Jiva Tattva, this can also be called as Ekatma Tattva, the one self. However, there is a difference, he says. However, there is a difference. In Eka Jiva, still the world is seen. Still the world is seen, whereas in Ekatma, there is nothing to see. There is only yourself. That is the integration, he says. That so far as we say that it is me who is feeling that there are many others to whom I am sending messages, so I have to aggregate all of them into me, but that is still Jiva Bhava, says Bhagavan. That is Eka Jiva Bhava, no doubt. We have now aggregated the multiple jivas into Eka. So the world being immortal is absorbed into jivas, because only one observer is there, observed is there. Therefore, all the multiple jivas are now absorbed into Eka Jiva. But still that is not finally said, because there is still the seer seen. Therefore, when self-attention takes over there, then Atma alone is seen. When one sees oneself alone, there the story ends. Yan kette tannilayil nitral talayahum. For the individuality to be completely annihilated, not a strand, not an iota to be left, completely annihilated, there the self-luminous self, the self-attentive self, which has now quietened into the self alone, is the pure being that alone remains, and that is the supreme state, says Bhagavan. With Bhagavan's immense grace, let us sit in practice of bringing everything to Eka Jiva. I am the seer, and bringing self-attention there. Who is this one seer? Who is this one seer? So that is directly practiced in Atmocharam. When we let go of thought and hold ourselves, we are practicing the art of self-attention, which is the Paramasya Shakti. The Paramasya Shakti has to aggregate itself and then subside. When all the I am the body attachment goes, it has to subside in the pure being of the self. Till then, Atmocharam will not leave us. Let us sit in practice for 15 minutes.
ನಮ್ಮೂರವಳು ನಮ್ಮೂರವಳಕ
sir. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. Very simply, with just the emphasis, the right emphasis on the words. And the Kumarji has taken us back to the core of Bhagavan's teachings, which is encapsulated in this verse. After having put it in the context of the first 4 verses, where the first verse is about the Atma Tattva and this one is about Ishvara Tattva, and then we have the world and the individual. But here also the emphasis has been that all these divisions are ahankaram irukku matte. So it was beautifully brought home to us, and the difference between Eka Jiva and the Eka was also brought home to us, because that's a very important aspect in sadhana. There is very beautifully, he said also, that if you don't go to the Eka Jiva, the multiplicity is endless. There is no end to experiencing the multiplicity. The multiplicity keeps on becoming more and more and more. And ahankaram irukku matte. Bhagavan says that when he was in Virupaksha cave, I think, or Skandashram, one day from the rock, as it were, one small insect, a flying insect, very small insect, emerged from the rock, as it were. And no sooner had it emerged from the rock, the sky was filled with those insects. Within almost a split second, not even a split second, says Bhagavan. So the moment this individuality arises, the multiplicity is there. And it was also brought home to us through the very simple scientific experiment. And that the moment I start seeing the movement of a particle, it remains as a particle, otherwise it is one with the universal wave. So the steps of the sadhana in the self, again, it is very clear to us that if we remain with multiplicity, and where do we experience multiplicity? How do we experience multiplicity? We experience multiplicity in the form of thoughts. So Bhagavan says, turn the attention from the thoughts to the thinker, ahankaram. All this multiplicity is there only because I see it. And don't see, as I don't see in deep sleep, what happens to this? It disappears. It very obviously disappears. So let us bring it back. Let us bring it back. And this is something which we can apply to every aspect of our life. This is also one point which Nandakumarji emphasized, that there is no situation or no difficulty which we may face where we cannot apply it. But we may not want to apply it sometimes. Sometimes, you see, there was an interesting anecdote which happened in our family, and it was that my sister's daughter, she was a child of 3, and we were all having a family get together in our house, and it was evening time and the current went off. Those days we did not have a UPS at home, so it was dark. For a few, we were actually in the midst of some games playing, and the child was happy. But when the lights went off, after a few minutes, she became restless and she started weeping. She started crying out of probably fear, whatever it was. And my brother-in-law started making light of the atmosphere. He started joking. He was joking, oh my God, how sad is life, the current is gone, how sad is everything. And in the part of the conversation, he started teasing all of us also for our self-pity, and all of us were laughing. Everyone in the family was laughing, and the child was a child. So without realizing even maybe what was the gist of the conversation or the exact meaning of the conversation, she also began to laugh. With all of us, she was laughing. She laughed for a minute and then she stopped herself and she told her father, "Don't make me laugh. I have not finished crying." So, very often, the solution, which is so simple, is to turn back to the I thought, which is this aham spurana, which in the context of the first verse, a very beautiful example has been analyzed. The example given by Bhagavan has been beautifully analyzed by saying that it is the Sakshi, and that the Sakshi is the screen and the I thought, the Spurana, is the light. So we can hold on to that light. The option is there. In fact, Dilip would often tell us, perhaps he still shares in his sharings, that we need not get worried when a thought rises. We can actually look at it as an opportunity. When a thought rises, oh, here is an opportunity to trace it back to its source. For whom is this thought? It is for me, I. So a thought can be there, the multiplicity can be there only when this I has arisen. Bhagavan says in Ashtakam, இன்றகம் எனும் நினைவெனில் பிற ஒன்றும் இன்று அதுவரை பிற நினைவெழில் ஆர்க்கு ஏற்கு என்று அகம் உதித்தலம் எதுவென உள்ளாழ்ந்து. So you go into the source. Whenever multiplicity is experienced, go back to the source. Go back to the source. And this option is always available to us if we wish to exercise it. But why do we not wish to exercise it? Because we do not recognize that therein lies the answer to all our seeking, says Bhagavan. Actually, you are seeking only that, he says in Ashtakam. And today also Nandakumarji said that it is that you will find all the answers to all the problems. But we have to start holding on to it. When we start holding on to it, even in a simple manner, we can see the difference in our lives, and we find a greater amount of peace in our lives. As Bhagavan told Humphreys, this is not to be analyzed by us, however, but it is there, it will be there. It is not to be something we say that, oh, I have done self-inquiry and this has happened. That defeats the purpose. And he says it will be unconscious power. But there is a great beauty will come into our lives the more we try to practice self-inquiry. And all that is asked of us by Bhagavan, if at all he is asking anything, is to try to practice. It's not even to effectively practice, because that again is a decision. There is, again, this point was also made today, that it's not a matter of making any decision. It's not a matter of making analysis or conclusion or decision, because that would bring it into the field of the duality again. So it is for us to simply to make the effort, And even thought of effort, thought of result, thought of non-result, everything can be offered into the same fire of self-inquiry, and as was beautifully concluded, that it is bound to take one back to the source beyond the multiplicity, beyond the duality, beyond every aspect of duality of even the Sakshi Bhava or the recognition that everything is one. Not even the subtlest of divisions will remain in the self, which is the fullness of grace alone. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramananchala.